The Higher Power of Lucky, Chapter 21. Amazing Grace. The sky was smeared with red as the sun dipped down behind the coastal mountains. "Hey," said Lincoln. "What's up?" "Nothing much," said Lucky, arranging the skirt of Bridget's dress attractively, as if this were a usual boring day. She felt her hair. It was full of sand, mineral oil, and twigs. Lincoln got out a string and began tying it into a knot. "We're living like the old miners. We ran away," yelled Miles. "I know," said Lincoln. "So does everyone else. They searched everywhere in town and figured out you must be here. I'm sure they'll be here sooner or later." "Are they very mad?" "Pretty worried, I guess." Short Sammy kept telling Bridget about all the times he ran away and how he turned out okay anyway. He was trying to calm her down, but I think he made it worse. Miles asked, "How did they know we're out here?" Lincoln shrugged. "Mrs. Prender said you were always talking about some burro named Chesterfield that lived in the dugouts," he said. Lucky sighed. "Want an egg?" she said. "Only if it's hard-boiled." Lucky thought how strange it was that some small things turned out just right, which was rare for big important things to do. As the sunset faded and the sky darkened, she and Lincoln ate eggs, Miles got a fig Newton, and HMS Beagle polished off a carrot. The feel of the air, soft and nearly still, was something you usually wouldn't even notice. But now, after the dust storm, it felt like a kindness, a special, thoughtful, anonymous gift. After a while, the full moon roared up into the sky behind their hill. Lucky thought that the people on Earth were very, very lucky to have their exact moon. They could have gotten a little puny moon like some of the other planets, and that would have totally messed up the oceans and the tides. Or their moon could have been too close or too far away. Or they could have had 2 moons or even more, and everything about their life would have been different. Lucky was sure, both as a scientist and as a girl speck looking for her higher power, that it wouldn't have been as good. She was thinking how most people didn't appreciate the moon enough at all, how they really didn't give it much serious thought. When Lincoln said, "Well, here they come." There were many vehicles bumping along the dirty road. Short Sammy's old Cadillac and Bridget's Jeep and Dot's pickup and Mrs. Prender's VW and the captain's van, and more following in their dust. They drove slowly, shouting, "Lucky! Miles! Lucky! Miles!" out of the windows. "We could hide," said Lincoln. But Lucky didn't want to hide, and anyway Miles was already lurching down to the road, as excited as if they had won a game of hide-and-seek. She sat on a rock and gazed out at the desert. Maybe they would think she'd kidnapped Miles and sent her to a special school in LA for bad kids. And if they did, she would become a bad kid. She saw herself in a room full of beds like a jail, each bed with a bad kid in it. They would take away her specimen boxes and her survival kit. Instead of being a ward with her own private personal guardian, she would become a ward of the state. And you can't sit on the state's lap and the state doesn't hug you before bed. Probably she would die of sadness, Lucky thought, seeing herself under a gray sheet, her face turned to the wall. Car doors were slamming and dozens of people were getting out and shouting and laboring up to their camp. The air was so warm that the moon was so bright it was almost like daylight, except more mysterious. Lucky got something out of her plastic bag and ducked into the shadows of the dugout where she could watch. She had something important to do before she surrendered. HMS Beagle ran joyfully around greeting each arrival, including several other docks. Everyone was talking at once, asking questions and hugging Miles. From inside the dugout, it sounded like the whole town was there. When Bridget called her name from nearby, Lucky stepped out into the moonlight and, looking down, saw that the silky dress and the urn both reflected its light. "Thank you for coming to this memorial service for my mother," Lucky said in a clear, strong voice, and everyone stopped talking and turned to her with surprised faces. She saw that Bridget suddenly had tears in her eyes. Lucky was not sure what should happen next. Then she remembered the thing that her father, the man she thought was a crematory man, had said to her. She'd said that the decision she made would be the right one. "These are her remains," Lucky went on, clutching the urn to her chest. The sense of her mother's smooth shoulder flooded her with sadness, and then Bridget smiled up at her and clasped her hands under her chin, almost like praying. As Lucky opened the lid of the urn, Short Sammy cleared his throat and began to sing Amazing Grace. Dot's high, clear, clean voice joined in, and then everyone was singing, their voices clear and ringing in the still night. Suddenly a breeze came, a little afterthought of the storm, as if, Lucky thought, some higher power was paying attention and knew what was needed. She walked to the edge of the ring of people and flung the remains of her mother up in the air, and everyone watched, seeing, as the breeze lifted and carried them out into the great waiting desert. The Higher Power of Lucky, Chapter 22, Nuit. Lucky put on her summer nightgown, which was old and had become tight at the armholes. It was fresh and California soft from the dryer. Bridget came to the door. "Ready?" she asked, and sat on Lucky's bed. Lucky was. Her hair was damp from a long shower that had rinsed off every speck of sand, grit, oil, and dust. She climbed onto Bridget's lap, even though she was really much too big. But she still fit, and she leaned back while Bridget wrapped her with her arms, like a present. Lucky felt sleepy and languid. Her knees were almost knobby enough to look like Bridget's knees, though Lucky's were brown and scabby and scarred. And Bridget's were beautiful and, Lucky searched for the word, womanly. From the floor where she lay, HMS Beagle touched her nose to Lucky's bare foot. "So the papers in the suitcase are to take the judge in Independence?" Lucky asked. "Of course, ma puce. We need to show him your birth certificate and my green card for living in California and all of that so I can legally adopt you." And Lucky stretched back into Bridget, feeling as if she'd come to the end of a long and difficult journey. "And the restaurant management course, that's to open a cafe in Hardpan. With a loan from your father, yes. What did you think, that I was going back to France?" "Oh, Lucky," said Bridget, and sighed. After a moment, Lucky said, "Bridget, what is a scrotum?" "It's a little sac of the man or the animal which has in it the sperm to make a baby," said Bridget in her deep, quiet voice. "Why do you ask about that?" "It was something I heard someone say," said Lucky. "For some reason," Bridget said, "you know, if anyone ever hurt you, I would rip their heart out." "I know," said Lucky, and she did. Tears came welling up behind her eyes for a second. Then they went back inside for some other time, a sad time. A certain crevice of Lucky's mind wondered if there is some kind of reservoir for tears where they are stored, because sometimes there are so many of them, pouring and pouring out. Lucky leaned her head back and breathed in the sunscreen smell of Bridget. She got the back of her throat and ready to say good night. In a drowsy, perfect French, he said, "Bonne nuit, Bridget." Through her curly wedge of hair, Lucky felt the smile on Bridget's cheek. Chapter 23 By and By. Lucky rigged the patio in front of the Found Object Wind Chime Museum and Visitor Center. There was much less litter now that Bridget's Hard Pan Cafe had opened for business. People went before and after the anonymous 12-step meetings to get a piece of apple pie or ham and cheese sandwich, which Bridget wrote on the blackboard menu as tarte aux pommes and croque monsieur, and pretty soon the geologists and tourists and everyone in town knew how to say a lot of French words. Once in a while, Bridget put out a platter called commodity tasting, cooked from the free government food, and people helped themselves. Usually she added garlic and herbs and spice to make it taste better, and Lucky had the job of sprinkling the platter with parsley. Lucky twisted shut the top of the black plastic trash bag and hauled it to the dumpster in the back. She inspected the place where the hole in the wall of the Found Object Wind Chime Museum and Visitor Center had been. She had plugged it with a fix-all. Not a sound emerged from inside. She had done a good job.